This unanswerable argument, built on impregnable facts, could not be met by all the eloquence and logic that could be mustered against it by the great triumvirate, Clay, Webster, and Calhoun. In a message to Congress, President Jackson, in speaking of the banking power, said, "In this point of the case, the question is distinctly presented whether the people of the United States are to govern through representatives chosen by their unbiased suffrages, or whether the power and money of a great corporation are to be secretly exerted to influence their judgment and control their decisions." These pointed shafts from the executive struck home and rankled in the breasts of those senators and representatives who supported the bank and its policy. When the bank ascertained beyond any doubt that President Jackson was firmly opposed to its further continuance, it began calling in its loans rapidly. The volume of currency was contracted greatly by the bank and its branches. Merchants were mercilessly driven to the wall. Mills and factories closed down everywhere, and tens of thousands of skilled workmen were thrown out of employment, and their families felt the pangs of hunger, notwithstanding there was abundance in the country. Every day it tightened its coils around its helpless victims, while President Biddle sat in his office at the bank and laughed at the needless ruin he wrought among his fellow men. His course is only paralleled by that of Nero, who is said to have fiddled while Rome was burning. The great journals of the leading cities, subsidized by loans, presumably, teemed with editorials denouncing President Jackson, anti-defending the course of the bank. Distress meetings at the same time and at the same points were held, fiery speeches were made, and strongly worried resolutions were adopted, requesting the president to append his signature to the bill renewing the charter of the bank. There was a singular identity in the editorials written, in the speeches delivered, and in the resolutions adopted that gave evidence of a concerted action. This similarity of sentiments and language in the journals, speeches, and resolutions evinced a most remarkable talent for combining the various means of influencing President Jackson. But the hero of New Orleans was as immovable as the Rock of Gibraltar. Andrew Jackson was in many respects the most remarkable man in American history. A sincere patriot of the purest integrity, with a clearness of mental vision that was unsurpassed, with a profound insight into the principles upon which our government rested, he plainly saw that the interests of the bank were wholly at variance with that of American liberty. He well knew that to transfer to a private corporation for its gain the issuance and control of the currency of the country and to accumulate in its vaults the national revenues would eventuate in building up a moneyed monopoly, ultimately controlling the press, the business interests, and the legislation of the nation. That point was now reached. He was utterly opposed to the government abdicating its highest sovereign function, the issuance and control of the currency, and delegating it to individuals or to corporations for their gain. He was conversant with the traitorous conduct of the bank during the War of 1812, and he concurred in the declaration of Jefferson that banks of issue were more dangerous to the liberties of the people than standing armies. In speaking of the firmness displayed by President Jackson against the arrogance of the bank, the distinguished historian Bancroft says, "When the period for addressing Congress drew near, it was still urged that to attack the bank would forfeit his popularity and secure his future defeat. The president replied, 'It is not for myself that I care.' It was urged that haste was unnecessary, as the bank had still 6 unexpired years of chartered existence. 'I may die,' he replied, 'before another Congress comes together, and I could not rest quietly in my grave if I failed to do what I hold so essential to the liberty of my country.'" Bancroft further says that upon one occasion when the bank conflict had reached its greatest height, the president and some of his friends were standing over the rocks of the Rip Raps, looking out upon the ocean, when the subject of chartering the bank was brought forward, whereupon the president remarked, "Providence may change my determination, but man no more can do it than he can remove these Rip Raps, which have resisted the rolling ocean from the beginning of time." History fails to record a nobler sublimity of purpose than that displayed by President Jackson during the War of the Bank upon the people. Notwithstanding the immense PR seizure brought to bear upon him, President Jackson, on the 10th day of July, 1832, returned the bill to the Senate, whence it originated, accompanied with his veto message, which was a masterly exposition of his views upon the true principles of free government, and it ranks in importance with the Declaration of Independence. The first reason assigned by the president in his objections against the renewal of the charter of the bank was that it created a monopoly under the authority of the general government, and therefore it increased the value of its stock far above its par value, which operated as a gift of many millions to its stockholders. The president laid down the fundamental principle that a monopoly should only be granted when it returned a fair equivalent to the people. He showed that while its capital stock was fixed at $28,000, to confer this privilege upon the bank would add the enormous sum of $17,000 to the value of the stock, and for this immensely valuable franchise, the government would receive the pitiful sum of $200,000 per annum. The president advocated the sale of the stock to the highest bidder, and that the premium received therefrom by the government be paid into the national treasury to lighten the burdens of taxation in lieu of its bestowal upon a few wealthy citizens. He stated that $8,000 of the stock of the present bank was held by foreigners, chiefly in England, that this was the most dangerous feature of the plan, that a majority of the shares of its stock might fall into those alien hands, and that in the event the United States would be involved in war with that nation, thus holding a large amount of the stock of this great bank monopoly, its influence would be thrown against the United States. The president says all its operations within would be in aid of the hostile fleets and armies without, controlling our currency, receiving our public monies, and holding thousands of our citizens in dependence. It would be more formidable and dangerous than the naval and military power of the enemy. He produced figures demonstrating the sectional character of the bank, that out of $35,000 of stock, $8,400 and $5,500 were held chiefly by Great Britain. Only $140,200 were held by the 9 great western states, $34,598 in the 4 southern states, and $13,522,000 in the eastern and middle states. That in 1831, the profits of the bank were $3,455 and $598 of this amount. The western states contributed $1,640,048. The 4 southern states, $352,507, and the middle and eastern states, $1,263,041. It will be ascertained that under the operations of this banking monopoly, the agricultural states of the West were paying heavy tribute to the East. It was further pointed out by the president that the principle of taxation involved in the bill was radically wrong in this, that only the stock could be taxed where held. Therefore, while the 9 western states paid $1,640,048 in profits to the bank, only $140,200 of its stock was held there subject to taxation. That in the year 1831, the branch bank at Mobile earned dividends of $95,140, yet the state of Alabama could not tax the property of the bank because net a single share of its stock was owned in its jurisdiction. The foreign stockholders could not be taxed a single penny on their holdings, as they were beyond the taxing power of the United States. The foreign stockholder would be drawing large dividends from the American people without bearing any of the burdens of government. This would tend to alien ownership of this bank, non-contribution to the burdens of government creating this valuable privilege, and a continued drainage of specie to foreign nations. The 4th section of the proposed law provided that the bills and notes of said corporation, although the same be on the faces thereof made payable at one place only, shall nevertheless be received by the said corporation at the bank or at any of the offices thereof, if tendered in liquidation or payment of any balance or balances due to said corporation or to such office of discount and profit from any other incorporated bank, the right thus conferred upon state banks to pay their debts to the United States Bank, with the notes and bills of any branch bank thereof, would tend to unify the whole banking interest of the nation into a powerful combination, while at the same time any individual who held currency issued by a branch of the United States Bank situated at any other place than his residence was deprived of that right. Therefore, he would be compelled to discount the bills of the branch bank or transmit them to Philadelphia to obtain the cash for them. These were a few of the reasons assigned by the president in his famous veto message. It is now conceded by the most eminent historians of America that General Jackson, in throttling the corrupt and unscrupulous money power of that day, saved the nation